Well, hello again, everybody. This is Pucks from the Pine Tree Pod. I'm your host, Benjamin Kennedy. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. We made it through another work week, guys. Yet again, dodging some snowflakes, of course, here in the Northeast over the last couple of days. Looks like we might have another good snowstorm coming in here just in time for Super Bowl Sunday. And to that note, who do y'all got in the Super Bowl this year? Another KC Philly matchup. Listen, I know so many football fans are just they're so tired of Mahomes and Kansas City and Taylor Swift and all that stuff, but it is a little bit funny, a little bit ironic because it's exactly how so many people felt about Brady and the Patriots. Listen, those dominant runs, they're fun when it's your team, but only when it's your team, right? So anyway, I'm pulling for Philly. I'd love to see Saquon get a ring. My best guess is it's going to probably be a very close game, and then some sort of a 50-50 call late will go Kansas City's way, get them the win. That's kind of how I see it happening. But anyways, everybody get those chicken wings ready, get the nachos ready, and hope you all can enjoy a good Super Bowl Sunday. So now turning our attention to the Boston Bruins, another brutal loss last time out there at MSG against the New York Rangers. A game where I thought you saw some good, especially in that second period, but just another slow start in the first, struggling to generate shots and offensive zone time. And just another game where your specialty teams just absolutely kills you. 0 for 3 on the PP, and of course, you give up the shorty game-winning goal to Chris Kreider there, later in that 3rd period. Watching the play over, McAvoy's back there. He was kind of forced to defend in essentially what kind of becomes a 2-on-1. The forwards for Boston, they are skating back, but Poitras just gets smoked down the ice by Kreider, who's then free and ready for that pass over, to the left side to put it by, Korpisalo. Listen, I know Matty isn't the biggest burner out there, but I'd have to go back and look, but I think he must have been near the end of a shift because he just looked gassed. He just looked gassed out there. So just definitely a tough break, frustrating play for sure for the team. But guys, that's now the eighth shorthanded goal Boston has given up this year. Eight. Just unacceptable. I can't remember the last time Boston gave up even half of that in a full season. So just a brutal way to lose a game and 2 points that you desperately need at this point in the season. Listening, to the boys there in the Morning Brew, of course, Jack and Razor, lovely podcast. If you haven't checked them out yet, they are absolutely awesome. Jaffe has said it a few times and said it again a couple nights ago that this team has to work so hard to get scoring chances and to get goals. No, it's not easy for this team to generate chances and to create those scoring opportunities. And at times, and I'm sure any other Bruins fan would agree, it's so very hard to watch. Optically, it doesn't look great on TV, especially that power play. Man, is it brutal? Is it brutal? Um, right now, the team is at a minus 24 in goal differential. That's not playoff hockey. That's not winning hockey right there. Only 7 teams in the league have a worse number than that, and I don't believe any of those are playoff teams. Listen, it happens, right? Washington a year ago got in with a minus, but it's not where you wanna be. It's not where you wanna be. Listen, just too many times where the Bruins are not willing to make the simple play, take the simple shot, whatever it might be. They're too slow, too much passing, and too often trying to make that pretty play instead of the simple play. And listen, we've seen elements of this type of play in past years, but those teams were more talented and talented enough to overcome some of these lapses. Not the case, guys, with this roster. Just not the case. So, with that trade deadline approaching, coming up here on March 7th, so just about a month away, what do we make of this team? What do we make of them, guys? Have we seen anything with any sort of consistency that gives you, as a Bruins fan, any confidence that a long playoff run is sitting in that dressing room right now. Currently they are sitting 27, 23, and 6. 60 points and good for sixth in that Atlantic division. Of course, as we know, just 1 point behind Detroit would not have the tiebreaker if they had that 1 point, though, for the wild card, too. And 3 points actually out of third in the Atlantic. So it's just super, super tight as it has been for the past few weeks. Will probably stay that way for quite a bit, maybe right down to the wire here. You might have three, four, or five teams right within a point or two. Could be kind of exciting, actually. But listen, truth be told, you know, I kind of expected to see this sort of season out of Boston last year. You lose Berge, you lose Krejci, you had some other losses on the team. You really didn't have the cap space to support any other moves there a couple years ago. So I went into last season feeling that this would be a team, kind of fighting for a wild card spot. Maybe they get in, and that would kind of be it, right? That'd be the ceiling. Instead, last season, you saw some amazing hockey, saw some career years out of a few forwards, guys like Charlie Coyle. Um, Great tandem in net, of course, and a first round win against Toronto. So all good things. So as you exited last season, the loss to Florida, with that as your backdrop, you felt like the Bruins had made progress actually. And yeah, you lose some, Hall of Fame type players from your team, but you walk into July with money to spend and some coveted players at needed positions, centermen in particular. So, I do believe it made some reasonable sense to expect a better year and a better result out of this group. But through 56 games, it's just not happening, right? It's just not happening. So let's say you are Don Sweeney. You are the GM of the Boston Bruins. February 7th, what do you do? What do you do? Listen, so many fans want him fired. What would you do if you were in his spot? Um, what do you want him to do, or what would you want to do, and what can you do? The two different things. Want and actual you know opportunity to do something. I mean, you need a trade partner on the other side to make things happen. Um, Listen, the team is sitting in that murky middle, right? Just, points wise, just right there, right? They're point or two out of a playoff spot, 2, 3 points out of being in third. So, it's you have a decent opportunity, right? You still have a decent opportunity to make the playoffs, despite how poor the play or inconsistent, I should say, the play has been. Um, but if you do make the playoffs, do we really expect this team to go on a major May June run for that Stanley Cup? Are they really positioned for that? So as I've been thinking about it, as I have up here on the board, I really think that Dawn has three primary options. And I know there's nuance. You could have four or five different options, but I really think these are like your three primary options. Go all in, option number one. Option two, maybe some minor trades, maybe a light reboot, kind of retool, whatever you want to call it. And then number three, of course, blow it up, sell the farm, and call it a season. Of course, as we know, Sweeney in the past, and with this group of veterans that he's had on this club over the years, we know he's tended to go all in and make that cup run. And hey, he's probably exploring options with some big time forwards that may become available. He may be looking at that. You do have a first round pick this year. You do have some younger players that might be of interest out there to other teams. Listen, I don't want to stir the pot here, but Matty Patra, Fabian Lysell, Mason Laura. I'm not saying you trade those guys. I'm just saying those are the guys that teams are going to be looking at if you're going to make a big trade. Um, but there's two real problems with this plan, though. With this going all in for it right now. First, you have no cap space to make a deal. For a second line wing, let's say, that's really I think what you need on this team. Yeah, you would have to come up with some, a lot of different cap maneuvering, and it could become very expensive very quick if you want to make a big time trade. The amount of money that would have to go back and forth, you'd probably have to get a third team involved. Would not be an easy trade to pull off, or trades to pull off, let's say. The second problem is that I don't believe you are just one piece away here, guys. You desperately need a second line scoring wing. We know this. You could probably use another defenseman, in my opinion, and you might even need a physical fourth line guy, kind of a la Garnet Hathaway from a couple years ago. So I think Don may find this challenging to go all in this year. I don't know if it's really possible. And quite honestly, I don't really think he should. I don't think that's the best option for this team this season. So then what? Let's go down to option three. Blow it up. Do we just blow it up? Um, I'm not sure I'm too crazy about that either. Despite the growing pains with some of these young guys, I do think that, some of these guys like a Matty Potch and Mason and Laura, I do think they're rising stars. And I have loved what you've seen out of Morgan Geeky this year. And listen, it wasn't a long look, but I do believe Fabian Lysell is getting closer to the NHL. He didn't look out of place when he came up. Like he didn't blow the world up or anything, but he didn't look out of place. You have big time guys locked up like Pasta, like McAvoy. Both Lindholms are locked up. Of course, Jeremy Swayman is locked up. So you've got a core veteran group here that's under contract for a number of years, and you probably aren't moving any of those guys right now, right? Listen, I know many fans would love to see Sweeney trade Elias Lindholm, but man, guys, like you would just take an absolute bath on that one. You just would. You'd be selling so low, and you'd probably have to eat some of that contract. I still feel there's value in keeping him. And listen, he has started to pick up the scoring a bit. He has been good in the faceoff dot this year. And we know it was a slower start for him in Vancouver last year. Now we're 56 games in. It's like time to get going here, Elias. But um, I do think also that, and I think I said it this summer as well, that with the NHL cap set to rise, which the league kind of announced that over the next few years, you're going to have some major moves there on the salary cap. This Lindholm contract won't be looking so bad. And let's just hope you get better production. I just think he would take an absolute bath. You'd be selling so low on him right now. I'm just not in the mood to do that. So, blowing it up really doesn't seem like a great option, in my opinion. So finally, there's that last option. Some retweaking, rewiring, perhaps, maybe a trade or two that can bring, some middle line forward help in, maybe someone with some term on a team friendly deal, or a player or two that can, help round out some of these middle lines, perhaps. I do believe this is most likely what we see out of the Boston Bruins this March. No big sell off, no huge trades going, all in for a cup run. I think you do keep your draft capital. I'd love to see them keep the draft capital. Listen, you guys know I cover the Maine Mariners. The way Boston has managed the draft over the last number of years, let's say last 10 years, absolutely has an effect on Providence and on Maine, their minor league teams. It absolutely does. So, I'd love to see them keep their draft picks and actually have a full draft this year, and I think that's what they should do. Keep those young players intact. Don't trade a Matty Poitras, don't trade a Lori, don't trade a Lysell. Keep them here, see what you have, but maybe make a couple moves just to reinforce the forward group that might help you today, might help you get into that Stanley Cup playoff, and may actually help you going into next year, give you a building block for next season. So with this, guys, I spent some time looking at a number of teams that, for all intents and purposes, are basically out of the playoffs or very unlikely to make the playoffs. So those teams were Buffalo, Montreal, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Nashville, surprisingly, uh, awful year for them, Chicago, Anaheim, Seattle, still kind of in the playoff mix, but I don't think they get in, and the San Jose Sharks. So I was looking for like potential forwards, either on expiring contracts with a likelihood of re-signing, perhaps in Boston, or players, on contracts with some term that could potentially be part of this group going into next season. Listen, keep in mind, none of these players I'm going to mention are going to drastically change your lineup, but are the types of middle line type players that every team needs if you're going to go on a future cup run. You just absolutely need those types of players. I also did take a peek at the Bruins players on expiring contracts, and maybe a player that could potentially be part of packages going out the door, either in a hockey trade, like a player for player type of trade, or maybe a trade for draft capital, something like that. So, as we know, that list includes Brad Marchand. He is signed right now 6.125 million last year, that contract. He's 19 goals, 24 assists for 43 points so far for him. You got Trent Frederick in there, 2.3 million. 15 points for him, kind of a down year for him. Cole Kepke's on this list, 12 points in 48 games. He's on a minimum contract, 775. Of course, Justin Brazeau started out strong, has kind of tailed off a little bit, but 20 points in 53 games. Another minimum contract, 775K for him. Parker Wallace-Spoon, part of that depth on defense on expiring contract, 800,000 for him. And of course, Vinny Lettieri just sent back to Providence. He's on expiring contract too. So out of that list, I do feel that Frederick and Brazeau probably would draw the most interest from other teams. I like both players, I do. However, it's fair to wonder if Frederick, in particular, has hit a ceiling. I didn't think he had coming into the year. I thought he had more room to grow, and I was very excited to see what upward trajectory would be there. But man, it's been a tough year for Trent. It just has. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's more to his game because I really like him. I like his physical play, but it just hasn't been there. As for Brazeau, obviously, you love how he worked really hard to earn this spot. He really had to earn this spot in Boston. Coming up through the ECHL, was played for the Mariners not that long ago. Love that, he's quite good around the net, better stick skills than you would assume given his large frame and size. But again, there's a ceiling to his game. And while he has struggled lately, he has had good numbers this year, career numbers for him so far. So maybe it's a situation where you can trade high on him. We shall see. Listen, there's been a lot of chatter about Brad. What do you do with Brad? Listen, guys, I don't think Brad goes anyplace. I don't think he goes anyplace. I think he's a Bruin for life. And I think it's kind of a non-story. Listen, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed if there was just a nice trade out there, because I think you'd get a huge, huge haul for him. I think any of those teams, think Edmonton, Colorado, Winnipeg, heaven forbid, a Florida. I don't think you would do that. But I mean, any of those teams, I think, would love to add a guy like Brad Marchand. And I think you would just get an amazing haul. But I just don't think it happens. I think it's a non story, a non issue. And I do think he'll be a Bruin for life. So let's turn now to the board, and I've picked out. I had a list of like, I don't know, 30 guys that I could have put on this board, but I picked out kind of my top five, and we'll just kind of talk through them a little bit in terms of potential trade targets for the Boston Bruins as we get to March 7th. Starting with Chicago centerman Ryan Donato, a 28-year-old, has played in 51 games for Chicago, 16 goals, 16 assists for 32 points, is on a $2 million expiring contract, will be a UFA next season. Having a career year in points, this now marks the fifth season with at least 12 goals scored for him. Of course, we know he's a Boston native. We know he was drafted by Boston in the second round back in 2014. We all remember that. And was one of the primary pieces that went back to Minnesota in the Charlie Coyle deal. Uh, I'd say a deal that's worked out very well for Boston. Listen, Coyle's been a steady centerman for the club over the years. So I think adding a Donato, this is one where you could make the money work. He brings you some scoring, some ability to center, and someone you could intermix, and I think in a couple different spots in your lineup. No term after this, of course, so it would create flexibility depending on what Boston wanted to do, what direction they want to go. They wouldn't have to necessarily resign him, but he could be, I think, a good piece moving forward years to come. I think he's playing very well and brings a lot to the table. Second player here on my list, Seattle's right winger, Eli Tolvanen, 25-year-old forward. So far through 56 games, did have a goal last night, 16 goals, 10 assists for 26 points. Does have a year left, so he does have some term on his contract, 3.475 million. So for Tolvanen, third year in a row with 16 goals, and will certainly surpass his total this season. A player who started in Nashville, as a younger guy, could never quite find a scoring touch or really find his spot on that team. Like we said, still only 25, and a player that potentially hasn't hit his ceiling yet. I think there's a lot more room to grow for him. He's a player you could easily bring in if you're Boston and become part of your core middle six. It appears he's been playing on his offside. He's a left shot right winger, so he's showing some of that versatility. I think he'd be a good gift for Boston. Listen, quite honestly, I'd be surprised if Seattle want to move him, given his age, given that there's manageable term, all that kind of stuff. Um, but and I also think Boston would probably have to overpay a bit to get him. But as a player, I like him. I think he could be, on a team that's trying to kind of build back. He could be part of a good core six. I'd love to see him as a target. Uh, we'll see. We will see. Uh, Next guy on my list here is Danton Heinen, 29 years old, of course, left winger for Pittsburgh right now, 53 games in total between Vancouver and Pittsburgh. 6 goals, 12 assists for 18 points for him. Has a $2.25 million contract with 1 year left on it. A player, of course, who needs no introduction for Bruins fans. I was probably most upset in losing him over the other exits from last July. I just love his versatility, his ability to play a responsible 200-foot game, can score a bit, and it's just one of those kind of jackknife sort of guys, sort of players. Keeping in mind he's a British Columbia kid, so it made all the sense in the world for him to sign in Vancouver. I had no surprise there at all. So when I did see the trade to Pittsburgh here recently, my heart did kind of sink for the guy just a little bit, right? Probably not what he had in mind when he signed that contract this summer. But listen, he did spend a couple years in Pittsburgh too, so that is a familiar stomping ground for him. But listen, Pittsburgh appears to be going no place fast and really needs to get younger. They got to get that roster younger, got to get more assets. So, um, and listen, Danton's two most productive years in his career have been in Boston. No surprise. The cap hit, I think, for Boston would be manageable here, and you do have a year term. So I do think this would be just a no-brainer move for the Bees, which of course is probably why it doesn't happen, right? So moving on, number 4 on my list, Chicago right winger, Ilya Mikheyev. Um, 30 games, or 30 years old, I should say, 51 games played for him, 9 goals, 7 assists for 16 points. A little bit more of a cap hit here, 4.75 million. That does have 1 year left. Probably isn't producing up to his talent level. I think that was kind of the case in other stops that he's had in his career. Um, but he's only a couple seasons removed from a 21 goal, 11 assists, 32 point line in 53 games for Toronto. Remember, he did play for Toronto there a few years back. I feel like this is less likely of a move for Boston, just based on the age and the salary, but still won't be shocked if the Bees maybe kick the tires on him a little bit because, of course, Chicago's going no place and clearly won't be surprised if he's dealt someplace. I do think somebody probably picks him up. I do think the cap would be a little tough because Boston's just right there near the top of the cap. But a player that could probably use a change of scenery and put him on the right line. Maybe you can tap into some of that scoring touch for him. I do think he gets moved. Had him on my short list here. And last player on the list, maybe less familiar to some more casual fans because he's played out west for the most part, but Luke Cunnin, right now playing for the San Jose Sharks. He's a centerman, 27 years old, through 56 games, 11 goals, 7 assists for 18 points. Will be a UFA next season, $2.75 million contract. Listen, player that's been around the league for a bit, did play in Minnesota and Nashville before joining San Jose. He's already matched his point total from a year ago and has 10 or more goals in 5 of his 8 years in the league. So some consistency there. Not a player that's going to catapult you right to a Stanley Cup, guys, but the type of player you need on a team to make that run. Solid third line type center who can play up and down your lineup a bit and it has some scoring ability. He, like we said, will be a UFA after the year. So I think he's the kind of guy at 27 years old. If you're Boston, if you look to swing a trade, he's probably a guy you like for today and like for tomorrow too. So you probably try to get him to re-up and re-sign before hitting the market. See if you can't keep him and make him part of that kind of core top 9 forward group. I could see him, maybe not the same type of player as a Charlie Coyle, but could be that kind of consistent third line type center for you. And listen, I think he'd be a much better option than some of the guys you've seen here in Boston's lineup so far this year. So, listen, as I said, these are 5 players. I could have put any combination of other 5 up there. They were probably, like I said, 25 or 30 uh, forwards I was looking at. But I think in some degree, some of these guys would make some sense if you're just going to do kind of a light retool, rebuild. And I do think I would not be shocked if all five, or I'd say four. I don't know if Tolvanen gets moved, but I think four of the five could easily get moved at the deadline. I know there's been a lot of chatter around the league about Donato, the first player we talked about. So we'll be curious to see what happens. So I will be back with you all later tonight from the Cross Insurance Arena as the Boston Bruins ECHL affiliate, the Maine Mariners, get ready to take on the Winnipeg Jets ECHL team, the Norfolk Admirals. A team that has given Maine fits this year. Maine only won 5-1 against them so far. So Maine also coming off a 5-game losing streak. Desperate, desperate, desperate for a win. So hopefully we see one there tonight. And anyway, guys, thank you all for watching and listening. If you do like what you're hearing, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below. And until next time, be kind, show love, and God bless.